Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel for some good news in the world of Star Wars gaming, which is very welcome right now. Just last week, EA and DICE confirmed that they were pulling the plug on Battlefront 2, at least as far as new content goes, which wasn't exactly news many of us were hoping for. Even though I think a lot of us expected it, the writing was kind of on the wall, unfortunately, even though there was still a ton of content that could have been done, but that's a topic for another day. As the Star Wars community tends to do, almost immediately after the announcement of Battlefront 2's final update, everyone was already starting to look to the future, and fortunately, we have some pretty exciting news that I am really excited to talk about, as it has been confirmed that Respawn is well into development of a Jedi Fallen Order sequel, and the game is currently set to be released in 2022. Just last week, Respawn also posted a new job listing on their website, and they are looking to hire a game writer for their Star Wars team. So if you think you're qualified and you want to work on Fallen Order 2, they are still accepting applications right now, so get on it. Obviously, a sequel to Fallen Order makes a ton of sense. The game was really well received by the vast majority, and more importantly, at least from a business perspective, Fallen Order sold way more copies than EA were expecting, so a sequel was pretty much inevitable. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, I assume you are, but EA like money. They really like money. On a more personal note, my first playthrough of Fallen Order ended up being quite a pleasant surprise. It was way better than I thought it would be, and the story and characters were the real highlights, which is what I'm looking for in a single-player game. With that said, even though I thought Fallen Order was a really solid game, I think there are several ways a sequel could improve on the first one, and there are also just a couple of things I would really like to see just from a fan perspective. One thing I really want Respawn to explore with Cal's character are his feelings on the clones. In Fallen Order, we spend a good amount of time in training flashbacks with a young Cal, learning from his master Jaro Tapal. As I'm sure you guys know, this ends pretty tragically. We get to see Order 66 carried out by the clones in-game, and while Cal escapes, Jaro Tapal dies, gunned down by the clones who were carrying out orders against their own will. Something I think would be really interesting to explore in a Fallen Order 2 are Cal's feelings on the clones who murdered not only Jaro Tapal, but most of the Jedi in the universe. I would absolutely love to see a mission in Fallen Order 2 where Cal comes across a surviving clone, or a group of surviving clones, and has to struggle with the knowledge that the clones killed almost everyone he ever knew, but also that they didn't know what they were doing when they did it. Maybe at first he's tempted to lash out and get revenge, and it just turns into a great moment for further character development for Cal, and it's just something I'd really love to see explored. Something else I'd really like to see that is also story related but much less specific is more of Merrin, because she was probably my favorite side character in the first game, but she was barely in it. It wasn't until near the end of the game, after the Malicos fight, that she became a member of the crew, and when the game was over, she was a character I really wanted more from. I've always found the Night Sisters really interesting, and she had really great chemistry with Cal, at least in my opinion, so I'd just like to see more of her in the next installment. I honestly would really love to also play as Merrin in certain parts of the game. Maybe you could even switch between her and Cal during certain levels. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like the potential for using Night Sister magic for combat is so high. I could also see that being ridiculously fun, and it would definitely be unique. Those are the only two things that really stand out to me when it comes to story-based hopes for the sequel. I mean, I definitely want to see where everything goes with Vader. I assume he'll be hunting Cal now that the Empire knows he exists, so that will be great to see, and who knows what else will be going down. I assume there will likely be a round 2 with the Ninth Sister. Maybe if they make more than one sequel, she'll be like Kenny in South Park and just keep coming back no matter how many times Cal kills her. Depending on when exactly— I don't actually want that to happen, by the way. Depending on when exactly the sequel is set, we also have Crimson Dawn and Darth Maul running around, so there are definitely a ton of possibilities depending on the direction Respawn decides to take. On the other hand, when it comes to game mechanics, this is where I think certain changes and additions could really help make the sequel an improvement on the first game, a huge improvement on the first game, which was already very good. The first addition I want to see, and I feel like this is a necessity, is New Game Plus. When I finished my first playthrough of Fallen Order, I was super excited to jump right into a second playthrough with all of my force powers and all of my lightsaber customization. However, I was very disappointed when I found out Fallen Order doesn't have a New Game Plus option at all, which was especially disappointing when you consider that you don't gain access to most of the lightsaber colors until the very end of the game, so you only get to use them for a couple hours, and then the game is just over with no option for New Game Plus. The way the first Fallen Order is set up made it difficult for Respawn to include a new Game Plus option, I'm sure. I mean, if you had all your force powers from the start, they would have had to change a lot of things just so you don't break the game, because you'd be able to access areas you shouldn't be able to if you had certain powers early on. In the sequel though, I hope they heard the very loud voices from the player base who would have loved a new Game Plus option, and I feel like this is kind of a necessity for a sequel. They kind of have to do it, because I feel like it's just such a wasted opportunity for even more game time. Another gameplay-based addition I really would love to see is some sort of arcadey survival mode just as an option for replayability. There was no bigger missed opportunity in the first game in my opinion. I mean, the main story has you fight multiple waves of enemies in a coliseum. It would have been perfect for a side game mode where you just try to survive as many waves as possible. It was a perfect setting and would have been such a fun arcadey experience just to experience the combat even more, and it's something I'd like to see explored in the sequel. I just hope there's side modes so you can replay certain things and do certain things over again. Something else that I'd really love to have the option of is the ability to replay boss fights after completing the game. I think I would revisit Fallen Order more if they had a side mode available where you could replay the boss fights as many times as you wanted. It's kind of a shame that you can't jump on and revisit the Malicos fight or the Second Sister fight, which were two of the most memorable moments in the entire game, and I think easy access to those boss fights after your first completion would be a great way to flesh out the second game and just give players more options after they beat it for the first time. There are also a couple of small mechanics I'd really like to see improved in the sequel. One thing that I found myself wanting during both of my Fallen Order playthroughs was a way to fast travel back to the Mantis. There are so many instances where the game has you travel to a specific planet and spend 10 minutes traveling across the planet for one specific thing, only for you to then have to spend another 10 minutes running all the way back to the Mantis just to progress the story. It's especially noticeable that you can't fast travel when you're trying to do the collectibles. You spend half the time just running back to the Mantis, so I really think a fast travel system back to a central hub would be a really nice quality of life improvement for the next one. Since I mentioned customization and collectibles, that is another area where Fallen Order just didn't really shine, and where the sequel has a huge opportunity to improve in a major way. In the first game, Cal had pretty bare-bones customization, a few different outfits, and of course the infamous ponchos. The lightsaber customization was admittedly pretty good, although like I mentioned it was a huge bummer you could only use most of the colors for the last couple hours of the game. I think allowing Cal and his outfit to be far more customizable is something Respawn really needs to look into, because I don't know who was asking for ponchos. It definitely wasn't me. The ship and BD-1 customization was also perfectly okay. It's mostly Cal himself that really needs some more options. I'd also like to touch on something I hope doesn't happen in the sequel, and that is Cal's force powers being reset. I really hope in the sequel you don't have to relearn everything over again. I don't think anyone wants to have to re-unlock all of the force powers Cal already learned. That would just feel really repetitive and also wouldn't make sense, but I've seen other games do similar things, which is why I'm worried about it in the first place. Obviously, Cal will still have a skill tree you can work on unlocking through the game. I just don't want the wall run and force push pull and freeze to all be locked at the start again. I think Respawn is going to have to get creative in the second game when it comes to more force powers, because they obviously can't make Cal too powerful, of course, but I hope the solution to that isn't just making Cal start all over again when it comes to us players. Lightsaber combat is also something I really hope to see expanded. I think the combat in the first game was very good, but one thing I really wanted to be able to do was use Cal's dual-wield lightsabers a bit more. They are just tied to an ability in Fallen Order, and that move uses force energy, so you can't really use them too often. I wish they could be used as a separate fighting style just like the double-bladed and the single blade. That's just a small request and something I think Respawn is pretty likely to do because it's a pretty natural addition to what was already rock-solid lightsaber combat. Well guys, that is going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed it and could leave a like, I would certainly appreciate it, and also, if you are new around here, feel free to subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.